Public school advocates want Arizona voters to decide in November whether to rein in the state's fast-growing, free-spending school voucher program. Could the initiative face some headwinds? I'll ask one of its leaders right now.
Also on Sunday Square Off, hours after being praised by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Maricopa County Recorder Justin Heap claims he uncovered more than 130 non-citizens on the voter rolls. What if Heap was wrong? Julie Erfley's quest to destroy the weapon that was used to kill her police officer husband runs into a dead end at the Capitol. Why an Arizona lawmaker scrapped the bill. Ice at polling places. Limits on Airbnbs. And what's that smell next door? Just some of the record 2,000 bills our state legislators believe are solving Arizona's problems.
We start with a planned statewide ballot initiative for November that would ask voters to rein in spending on empowerment scholarship accounts and require private and parochial schools to follow many of the same regulations as public schools. The initiative is called the Protect Education Accountability Now Act. Joining us, Beth Lewis, Executive Director of Save Our Schools Arizona and a leader of the initiative. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks for having me.
I like giving folks a little bit of history. Right.
Yeah.
You have a history with this that goes back to 2018 when you were one of the leaders of an initiative that blocked an expansion of the ESA program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Save Our Schools Arizona was actually formed when the legislature in 2017 passed universal vouchers. We said, this is going to decimate public education. We put it to the voters, we collected signatures, and the voters in 2018 said no, right? They said no by a 2-to-1 margin. And yet the legislature came back in 2022, discarded the will of voters, and passed universal vouchers anyway. And here we are.
And so go back to 2022, because there were questions at the time about why you didn't try to either head that off or, after it became law, reverse it. Why didn't you fight it back then?
Right, so we did try, and ultimately, you know, Governor Ducey at the time waited 10 days. He took a bunch of time out of the field, and we weren't successful in referring it. And so, you know, I think voters have had a chance now to look at the body of evidence for 3 years and see, okay, here are all of these examples of fraud and waste. You know, there are a lot of questions as to whether kids are safe, whether there's any academic accountability, and the legislature has had 3 years to make fixes, right? To put in guardrails to make sure that taxpayer dollars are being well used, that kids are learning, and they've utterly refused. And so, you know, I think now is the time to put this back in the hands of Arizona voters, right? The taxpayers who should have a say about a $1 billion program with 0 guardrails.
And Governor Katie Hobbs, in her first 3 years, has also tried to push back, but not very hard, it seems, or just.
Well, I think she's up against a brick wall, right? Like, the Republicans have made it very clear at the legislature that this is the, you know, sacred cow, if you will, and that, you know, they're not willing to even put in place child safety regulations. And so, again, you know, we've helped craft bills. We've worked with lawmakers down at the Capitol for years and years, and nothing has been accomplished.
So here we are, 100,000 students enrolled in the Empowerment Scholarship Account program, cost of about $1 billion and climbing. Here's what your initiative would do. Bar families making over $150,000 from receiving vouchers. Require private schools to meet public school standards like background checks on educators. And bar parents from spending on non-educational items or luxury goods. Which of those bullets do you think will really make a difference with voters?
You know, I think voters, I've seen the polling, voters really want to make sure that our kids, all kids, are safe. And that's important to us as educators and parents. Voters are fed up with the fraud and the waste and the abuse and all of these stories. So I think reining in those non-educational spending pieces, the luxury items, and actually putting, you know, stricter teeth on that into law is really important to voters. And then I think voters are sick and tired of using their hard-earned dollars to subsidize a private education for the wealthy that, you know, they were already able to afford. And so voters have been really clear that that's not something that they want to shell out for when people are struggling to make rent or struggling to put food on the table.
I need to point out, reporting by Craig Harris of 12 News shows a high rate of unchecked spending by ESA account holders. Documents show unallowable purchases, spending explicitly banned under ESA program rules, might account for 20% of transactions. That's not dollar value, it's the number of transactions under the program. That's 1 in every 5 transactions. And clearly, Tom Horn, the superintendent, has struggled mightily to keep up with this. It's unclear whether he even has a handle on the program. And full disclosure, 12 News has sued the state school superintendent, Tom Horn, and state treasurer, Kimberly Yee, to obtain documents on ESA spending. And that's how we know a lot of this, because of Craig's reporting and the lawsuit to obtain the information. Would you like to see the ESA program just go away?
No, I mean, we have always been clear that the original program, or the 2011 program for students with special needs, special circumstances, should stay. And one of the things we've done with this really common sense package is to really preserve the flexibility for ESA families with students with disabilities. So there are a lot of carve-outs. The income cap does not apply. The testing component does not apply. But the safety components do, because all of our kids should be safe.
ESA supporters would say that every parent has a right to educate their child in the way they see fit. That's how ESAs fit in. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this package doesn't really change those options unless you're in the top income tier for the state. What it does is it makes sure that the private entities and folks that quite honestly have come in as bad actors are no longer able to take in taxpayer funds if they're not able to prove that kids are safe, kids are learning, and they're using those funds responsibly. And so, again, this is a win-win. This was crafted with the support and guidance of ESA families, particularly those with special needs students who, were very clear with us, like, here's where we need to be exempted. But we really support this because all of our kids deserve a great education.
And so I wonder whether the initiative faces some headwinds that weren't present 8 years ago. So much has changed since 2018. The COVID pandemic had a big impact on parents' perception of public schools. Right now, we're in a moment where public schools are closing schools, having to close schools, lay off staff because of declining enrollment. How do you think that picture will affect voters when it comes to casting a ballot on this, assuming it makes the ballot?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we knock a lot of doors. We've seen the polling, so we're really in touch with voters. Voters want this transparency, they want the accountability, but overwhelmingly, they love and support public schools. They want to see misused dollars go back into their local public schools. They know that if we have strong public schools, that we have a strong economy, we have strong communities, we have safe neighborhoods. None of that has gone away, right? Just because out-of-state special interests have poured a ton of money into our state, denigrating our public schools and our public school educators. It hasn't worked. Voters are still with us. And yes, some parents are making other choices, but 90% of our families are still choosing their local public schools. That hasn't changed. And over 90% of students with disabilities are still being served by their local public school.
What is your assessment, though, of those numbers? Again, declining enrollment, layoffs, school closings. Is that a result of all the school choice options in front of Arizona parents right now?
We're not seeing a huge shift from public school to private school because of the voucher. Again, we're continuing to see a lot of the vouchers are going to families that were already in homeschool or were already in private school. There is some decline, absolutely, related to birth rates, related to, affordable housing crises. And then, there is a small percentage of folks that are leaving. And unfortunately, because our public school system is funded, bare bones, almost worse in the nation, there's just not any fat to trim, right? There's no budget cushion. And that's why we're seeing school closures. It's not because there's some exodus from public schools. That's not happening.
You have until early July, to collect at least 256,000 signatures, probably more like 400,000 to get the cushion you typically would need. Can you pull this off? How much is that going to cost?
Yeah, I feel very confident we can pull this off. We've got incredible organizations and folks all across the state that have already signed up. They're ready to go. I think, back in 2022, we were sort of fighting hypotheticals like, this is going to cost $1 billion, and people weren't sure if that was true, right? This is going to be wide open for fraud, waste, and abuse. People weren't sure whether they should believe us, right? This is going to shut down public schools. they weren't really sure. Now there's this body of evidence, and so people are just rushing to our website, rushing to sign up to volunteer. So we'll be able to get, a huge amount of these from volunteers, from educators, from families, and also just from everyday folks who are looking to protect public education and make sure that all of our kids get what they need.
All right, Beth Lewis of Save Our Schools Arizona, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When we come back, can this marriage be saved? A very public breakup between Maricopa County's top elections officials raises questions about the 2026 vote. But first, why won't state lawmakers vote to destroy a gun that killed a cop? And a programming note, NBC and 12 News coverage of the Winter Olympics in Italy will preempt Sunday Square Off on Sunday mornings through February. You can still watch us on the 12 Plus streaming app at 8 a.m. or on the 12 News YouTube channel. 12 Plus is the streaming home of 12 News. You can see all our Sunday Square Off coverage there. Download 12 Plus on your Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV devices right now. Stay with us.
I want it destroyed. It doesn't deserve a second chance. My husband didn't get a second chance. Why would this weapon get a second chance?
And welcome back to Square Off. That was Julie Erfle, widow of slain Phoenix police officer Nick Erfle, telling me last fall why she wanted the weapon used to kill her husband destroyed. Standing in the way is a state law requiring the sale of weapons confiscated by police. Now, this past week, a House bill that would have amended the state law was scrapped less than 24 hours before its first committee hearing. The bill had strong bipartisan support. Erfle believed the bill's Republican sponsor, State Representative Wang Win, caved into political pressure. Win denied that. Republican Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell supported the legislation. Mitchell still believes the bill could be revived.
I'm still hopeful that this legislation passes. It's common sense. It is not a step down the slippery slope of destroying guns. It is just the human thing to do.
And Julie Erfle's bill was one of more than 2,000 filed during the current legislative session. That shatters all records for bills, according to the Arizona agenda. Now, many of the bills will die for lack of a hearing. Some others, a few, will be passed, only to be rejected by Governor Katie Hobbs' record-smashing veto stamp. Here's a sample of the bills still in play. Republican Senators Jake Hoffman and Wendy Rogers want to force Arizona's counties to let ICE agents deploy at polling places. This bill is pure veto bait for Governor Hobbs, but might score points with the Republican base. A bipartisan bill that takes on the rapid spread of short-term rentals could actually solve some problems. It would set new occupancy limits and give cities more power over problem properties. Then there's the "what's that smell coming from the neighbor's house" bill. Republican Senator J.D. Mesnard, a Chandler resident, wants to criminalize excessive marijuana smoke and odor. Is this a widespread problem? Could be. Senator Mesnard's neighbors, you've been warned. When we come back, questions about the database that checks Maricopa County voters' citizenship. Stay with us.
Justin Heap is here. He's the recorder of Maricopa County. I want to thank him for sharing some wisdom with me on what we can do to partner together.
And welcome back to Square Off. Hours after being praised by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Maricopa County Recorder Justin Heap claimed he uncovered more than 130 non-citizens on the voter rolls. Do we know Heap was right? Could he have been wrong? Sasha Hupka, elections reporter for the Vote Beat, has done a deep dive on Heap's numbers and the controversial federal database he relied on. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get to the citizenship data in just a minute. First, the public saw the latest installment this past week of the bitter year-long fight between Heap and the Maricopa County Board. The board ordered Heap to appear, answer their election-related questions. If he didn't do that, the board could have, under state law, remove him. which caused a whole political fight, which we won't get into right now. He did show up. What's your takeaway from what you saw at that meeting?
My honest takeaway is just how much the communication between these two entities has completely devolved. I mean, they were talking in this meeting about tweets. They were talking about unanswered letters. And all of it seemingly, apparently their attorneys behind the scenes are not communicating well. They can't even agree on whose turn it is to give a counteroffer in writing. And all of this to me indicates that they're not having really any communication behind the scenes. And that's a problem because these election officials all have to work together in order to pull off 2026 in the largest county and a key swing region in Arizona. So I think it really raises a lot of questions around how these coming elections are going to go.
And the fight has been over what's called the Shared Services Agreement, which basically says who does what when it comes to running our elections. And Justin Heap is in charge of the early vote, but he seems to want more?
So Heap is statutorily in charge of mail-in early voting. There's also in-person early voting, which is when you go to a polling site yourself physically before Election Day and you're able to cast a ballot. Historically, within the last few years at least, the board has typically done this because they control in-person voting on Election Day. And so if you're going to have polling places open early and you're going to have poll workers there to assist voters, and then you're also going to have to do all of that on Election Day, it has kind of made sense seemingly for the board to be the one to sort of pull this off. Heap wants that. And so the board, sort of in their latest settlement offer that they publicly gave in this meeting, they essentially said they intend this election cycle to give him that in-person early voting that he wanted. But it's unclear whether that resolves this ongoing legal battle that they're stuck in this ongoing dispute.
What's interesting about that is, Heap was helped into office by the election denier caucus on the Republican side, far-right Republicans. There are concerns, as I hear from the board members, about the locations he would choose for those early voting sites. Concerns that he might believe they have skewed Democratic in the past. He's a Republican and might want them to skew Republican. Is that even possible legally for that to happen, do you know?
Well, in the resolution that the board passed, which is essentially their statement of how they are going to move forward in 2026 in terms of this dispute without an SSA, they laid out that he'll have the in-person early voting, but they also laid out in there that they expect the sites to comply with all state and federal laws, to be equally geographically distributed, and to not be distributed in such a manner as to advantage Democrats or Republicans in any way, shape, or form. I think the main takeaway I take from this actually is more so that these two sides also seem to increasingly be throwing these claims at each other of attempted disenfranchisement or attempted wrongdoing. And it's unclear if those claims are even true. Right. And I think that that's also a problem because that's feeding into a misinformation cycle ahead of this very important election where clearly these people aren't agreeing. And if you have a situation where even something very minor goes wrong on Election Day, what you've seen in the past is that the recorder's office and the board have typically presented a unified front. And it's pretty clear that this time around, that's not going to happen. So if something very minor goes wrong, it can sort of spiral out of control because they're immediately going to be pointing fingers at each other. And I think all of this is very, it implies all of that.
Very good point. Very good point. Let's move to the citizenship data. Big picture, what have past studies found about voting by non-citizens in our elections?
It's extremely rare. It's minuscule. It's not that it's impossible or that it can't happen, but there's been just so few cases. In my time in Arizona, I think there's only been one that I'm aware of, count them one, case where a non-citizen was found to have been registered. And in that instance, the non-citizen was, of course, I think ultimately removed. And the non-citizen had never voted. They had signed up accidentally. It is so rare, and there's been so many studies that have proven this.
What did Justin Heap find using the SAVE database, federal database?
So his office says that they found 137 non-citizens on Maricopa County's rolls.
Registered to vote.
Registered to vote. Of those, it says that 60 of them had voted in previous elections. This was based on running a fairly small sample, actually, of Maricopa County's voters through this database, which is sort of a new and enhanced version that now allows for mass verification. Here's the problem. In other states, that new and enhanced version of that database has returned a lot of false positives. And certainly those numbers, given what we know about non-citizen voting, right, make my eyebrows and experts' eyebrows go up. And so it's unclear, did that office, did they do anything to second check, to verify that these people who were flagged by this system are in fact non-citizens? Did they do anything to verify their citizenship status besides putting them through a system that has proven unreliable?
Do we know, has he done that?
We don't know. He has not answered my questions on that. The statement that he put out on this, which was very sudden on a Friday night before a holiday weekend, was very bare bones. It did not mention whether he had done that. It did not mention whether he had sent notices to these voters as required under state law. He has to send notices and give them about a month to respond with proof of their citizenship if they're able to provide that. It did not say anything about whether he'd done that, and he hasn't answered my questions about it.
And he also said he would turn the data over to the Attorney General's office and the Maricopa County Attorney's office. We are taping on Friday morning. As of this moment, has he done that?
No, I heard from both of those agencies yesterday afternoon that he had not done that. I reached out to his office asking them for comment on that, and again, I did not receive a response. So it's possible as of this very moment that they did it, sort of between late yesterday afternoon and this morning. But as far as I know, that hasn't happened, and neither of those agencies have, updated me to tell me that he had.
But it sure made a lot of noise on social media, which may be the most important thing. Don't know. Hopefully you can get more, come back to us and report. Sasha Hupka, thanks so much for the work you do.
Thank you for having me.
That's our show for this week. Thanks very much to all of our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. See you back here next weekend for another round of Sunday Square Off.